All right, here we are, Unit 2, Video 3, Parallelograms. All of Unit 2 is going to be on quadrilaterals and their properties and different things that happen with them. But again, the start of every video, make sure you read your success criteria here, what we're going through. We're going to talk about the properties of a parallelogram. You got to be able to identify the properties of a parallelogram in a picture, set up an equation, and solve for missing angles. All right, so the first thing before we get into parallelograms, this really is our first video about quadrilaterals. So what is a quadrilateral? It is a four-sided closed figure. All right, and it has one important property, just like triangles do. It's going to be that the interior angles sum to 360. So just like our angles in a triangle add to 180. The angles in any quadrilateral will sum up to 360. So in the question we have below, kind of just to get started, just to make sure we have some easy questions to start. All four of these guys, 60, 112, and 87, and this question mark should add up to 360. So what we'll do, so when we do with triangles, we'll take the 60, we will add 112 and 87, and we'll get 259, and then we could do 360 minus 259 to get our missing angle of 101. All right, so this angle here would be 101. All right, now we're going to learn about a bunch of different quadrilaterals in this unit. Here's our quadrilateral family tree. The one that you really can ignore is the kite. We don't actually do any work with kites in this class, but the trapezoid, parallelograms, isosceles trapezoid, rectangles, squares, and rhombuses, we're going to talk about all of them, all their different properties, and all the different special things that they have. So the first one for this video, we are mainly going to focus on the parallelogram. Now, when you have a parallelogram, all right, there are 5 properties that you are going to have to memorize. You're going to need to know the 5 properties. You're going to need to know how to mark them on a picture, and you're going to need to know how to use them in the questions. So the first property is opposite sides are parallel. So the first one is opposite sides are parallel. Now, that's an easy one. It is right in the name, parallelogram. So we know that this side is parallel to this side, and AD is parallel to BC. Now, if you want, you can write out what's going on in notation here on the side, if this is helpful to you. You may need it later on, but that's something we can do. That's our first property of parallelogram. Our second property is that opposite sides are also congruent, right? So that means that AB is the same length as DC, and AD is the same length as BC, right? And again, we can write it out in notation if we want. We don't have to, but it's good to know how to do this for videos in the future or just for practice in the future. Next one, we move away from sides here. We're starting to talk about angles. So just like opposite sides are congruent, opposite angles are going to be congruent. So angle A is going to be the same as angle C, and angle D is going to be the same as angle B. All right, so again, if you want to write down what's what, have this down on the side for you. So those opposite angles are going to be congruent. All right, next one, consecutive angles are supplementary. Now, with this one, first we need to talk about what consecutive means when we talk about quadrilaterals. Consecutive for us is going to mean next to. So angle A plus angle D is going to equal 180. Angle D plus angle C will add to 180. C and B will add to 180, and A and B will add to 180. All right, so it's going to help us with certain questions. We may see one of those in the example. All right, fifth and final property, diagonals bisect each other. So now again, a diagonal is this line that goes across these opposite angles. So when they bisect each other, if we know way back from the first unit that this 2 pieces will be the same and these 2 pieces will be the same. It's kind of like this is the midpoint for both of those diagonals, right? So that helps you. We could call this the midpoint. All right, so those are our 5 properties. You have to memorize them. We're going to have tests and quizzes on them. And in order to know your other shapes, your rectangles, your rhombuses, and your squares, you have to know the parallelogram first. All right, so we got 3 examples for us to go through. Hopefully this will help you in a different way that these properties are used. All right, so first one, Regents question. The diagram below shows parallelogram LM and O. With diagonal LN, angle M is 118, LNO is 22. Explain why NLO is 40 degrees. So I like to go through the math to figure out how I would find NLO. How would I do this? Over here, NLO. So that when I go to make my explanation, I kind of went through the problem, the way I kind of know what I want to explain. So there's 2 ways to do this question. We'll probably do the second one tomorrow in class. But the first thing, when you see this word parallelogram, you know that you now have access to the 5 properties from the last page. So the first property that I'm going to use is that opposite angles are congruent. So I know that angle O is 118. After I do that, I'm going to focus on the fact that this is a triangle. And what I should be able to do now, we should remember here from triangles, is 22 plus 118, 140, and then 180 minus 140 is 40. That's going to give me this question mark here at 40 degrees. Now, because the question says explain, this means in words. I have to talk about why or how I found NLO. So my first thing, I would write this in bullet points or in some sentences, right? What I would say is angle O is 118 degrees because opposite angles are congruent, right? And we know that because it's parallelogram. And then the next thing I would write is that the 3 angles in a triangle add to 180 degrees. Now, again, we don't have to go super in depth here because the angle O part we labeled in the picture, and the 3 angles adding to 180, we kind of showed that, right? We kind of showed that over here. So I don't really have to kind of go super in detail because I kind of showed my work that went along with the explanation, right? But explain means in words. Right. Next Regents question. Again, this one comes up all the time. They love this as a multiple choice question. We're going to do it as part 2, but it's the same concept. So again, I see this word parallelogram, which tells me 5 properties. I got to know my 5 properties. I might not use all 5 of them. I got to know what they are. So we keep reading here, and then we get CE is congruent to BE. Now again, when I see these 2 lines being congruent, this tells me here that I have an isosceles triangle, which means 2 equal sides and 2 equal angles. That's going to help us out. So the first thing, label what they give us, 112. Now, what property am I going to use first? Well, from the parallelogram, if angle D is 112, angle B has to be 112. So that's something that we know. That's got to be 112. Opposite angles are congruent. Next, 112 in this makes up 180. That's a linear pair. So I need to fill out what this angle is. So 180 minus 112, that's going to give me 68. Again, going back to the isosceles triangle, these 2 angles are the same. So if that's 68, this is 68. Now I have a triangle. We can do 68 plus 68 equals 136. And then 180 minus 136 is going to be 44. So this is going to be 44 degrees. Fortunately, that's what we're asking for. So we got 44. The other angles we can find, again, just so you can see how some of the other properties work, is if this angle D is 112, angle A, these are supplementary. So if that's 112, this is also 68. And then again, opposite angles are congruent. So this is also going to be 68. All right, so again, just a little extra there to see that you can find all of the missing angles in this picture. All right, what's important again is those 5 properties. Have to know the properties in order to do this question. You have to know opposite angles are congruent, and then you have to know isosceles triangles. All right, last question. This one should be a little quicker. Kind of already started it, looks like I didn't erase it. That's all right, we'll do it together. So when we see parallelogram, we have the 5 properties. In this case, it's going to be that opposite sides are congruent. And I know that because they gave me these side lengths. So again, if those 2 sides are congruent, what I could do is set them equal to one another and solve for x. Subtract 3x from both sides, subtract 5 from both sides, and we get 10 equals x. All right, this one's a little bit more straightforward than the first two. First two are regions questions, and this one's just a property question. All right, so again, this is going to be the end of the video. Study these 5 properties. Going to have a quiz on these, going to have a test on these. Have to know the properties. You have to have them memorized in order to be able to use them. All right, so again, you can get on to your practice questions for video 3. Get ready for that mastery check, that 5-question quiz coming up. All right, I'll see you guys in the next video. We're probably going to do rectangles, but again, in order to do rectangles, have to know your parallelograms first.